I'd like to welcome everyone again to our Friday COVID Convo for an agenda today. Fred will kick us off with some updates on what we've learned from MDE and other case rates and so on. We'll get our updates from our three different school districts, both Mora, East Central Schools, and Bemidji again today. And then we're going to hear from Dr. Bruce Jensen from the Northwest Service Co-op. He's going to give an update on the regional support teams from the service cooperatives and what they've been working on as of recently. And we're going to hear again from Neil Carlson from the University of Minnesota, be talking about some of the work that they're doing at the university and some case rates and that type of information as well. To get started, I want to start by thanking Superintendent Craig Optendahl and also Superintendent Belinda Selfers for their feedback and comments. And I want to thank them for providing that to us. And also want to let others know that feel free to invite others to these calls. Again, I think that's great information. We've had great feedback from peers across the state continuing to do this. So please pass it on so others can also take advantage of this. I want to also make sure everyone's aware for next week, due to MEA weekend, we are going to be switching to Wednesday, a Wednesday COVID Convo. So from Friday to Wednesday next week, from noon to 1, same time. And we're going to have Todd Rapp kind of lead us through some of the communication initiatives. A lot of folks are feeling fatigued with this, and we want to just talk about that and how do we overcome some of the fatigue, and it's getting tiresome. And so we'll have our panelists talking about that a little bit next week. So with that, next slide. I'm going to turn things over to Fred Nolan. Fred?
Well, thanks, Jeff. And we now have data from school districts on school buildings and the number of buildings that have over 5, and there are 5 cases. There's 11 of those, 9 public and 2 are parochial. And so since school districts are asked to start with the county case rate, I was wondering if there's a relationship between the case rate and whether a building had 5 cases or not. And there really isn't, in the sense that the range is very wide from 23.1 to 91.66, which is Martin County. And 3 of the buildings are in Martin County, Fairmont High School, and then 2 parochial schools. So I think that leads right to the comment that Deputy Commissioner Heather Mueller made yesterday, that you really should use more data than simply the county case rate and your regional support teams in making learning model decisions. And she even referred to the safe learning plan. She said that we were really clear about that at the very beginning, that you start with the county case rates. So I think that's good advice. It does make complex decision making, and I think Bruce will address that a little bit later today. They also made a big deal about the headlines, the inside indoor spectator guidance, Drew, and that is in the guidance on page 20. But they also, back on page 66, said they're not expecting to see any way that they can get out of MCA testing this year from the federal government. And so their plan, no matter what learning plan you're in and what learning plan the students are in, for in-person assessment. So I think after the first of the year, you're going to want to bring your assessment coordinator into your planning teams and try to figure out how that's going to work this spring. And I know MTAS and those things are on a different schedule than the main MCAs. Well, that's great to look forward to. And so now, hopefully we'll turn it to Dan. And Dan, why don't you give us some good news to start with from Moore, and then go through your distance learning information.
Sure. Thanks, everyone. Well, I guess it's a great day out there today, and we're starting football here tonight for everyone. So a lot of exciting things happening. I think there's so many positive things that we're seeing out there from our teachers and our students as we walk around our schools, and it's easy to get lost in the guidance and the day-to-day grind, I would say, for making our schools operate, whether it be transportation or food service and things like that. But I guess my focus would really be on the creativity of our staff, and what they've been doing with our students is just amazing. And we're doing things that we've never done before here in education, and we're doing them probably better than we've maybe ever done them before. I always try to at least post one thing on social media every day of some positive stories that are coming out from our school, whether that be in any part of the situation. So it's been really awesome to see my first year here in Mora, all the excellent educators and support staff that we are here. So I would just say, take some time to look for their positives out there, because there certainly are so many more than there are challenges. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're looking for, Fred.
Excellent. Great tip to post something every day. Positive.
Yeah, exactly. This week we were talk a little bit about distance learning, and we in Mora call it our Family Flex option. And so I polled some of our teachers at the elementary and high school and asked them what's working for them, and what are some of those challenges. You should know that in the elementary, our teachers are teaching more. We have dedicated Family Flex or distance learning teachers, and they take a group of anywhere from 20 to 25 students, and some are in one grade level and some are in a couple of grade levels. And they're basically those distance learning teachers. So some of the things that have worked for them is just setting up that consistent schedule for families and for students to log on, and trying to keep that online lesson going throughout the entire time, so that kids can work and they can get the support from their teachers and ask questions. So having those, whether you use Google or Zoom or whatever, having those be online. Also, what's working is just to review lessons for them, and to follow up and make student connections. And I think that some of the other superintendents are going to talk about the connection piece a little bit more as well. So at the high school, we're doing something a little bit different than the elementary. They're trying to teach a regular class and also teach their distance learners. And so you can see a couple pictures there of teachers doing that same thing. And what's interesting, when I sat in on their classrooms, the kids are online on the screen, and they are also teaching to the rest of the class. So they're all together. And so that brings in that community feel. And the other students that are at home feel a part of the class. They feel a part of the discussion. They can ask questions to their teachers while they're going. And it adds that accountability piece that I think everyone struggled with last spring in distance learning. So those have been some things that have worked well. I've also seen and heard of teachers switching back and forth between different things that work well and different things that don't work well. So you've probably all experienced that as well. Our current situation in Kanabec County is, well, we're looking for positives. Here's a positive. We have our case rates are actually going down after trending up from the beginning of the year. Currently, we're sitting at about mid-20s, and our rates, according to our call yesterday, are actually going down. And so we're actually preparing to go down to phase 2, which would be hybrid in the high school and in person in elementary. So some things that we've been trying to address, and I'm sure that you guys are all trying to figure out the same sort of things. Staffing has been a challenge. We've had some people go out on quarantine, so trying to cover classes when people aren't there with enough subs. Keeping that communication line open between all the stakeholders has been a priority for us. And we're getting ready to, I guess, transition between models again. So some of those things that we did the first time, like, going through our process for transitioning and making sure that our team knows, our school board members know that we may be transitioning, And so like this morning, we had a meeting with our elementary and high school principals, and we just talked a little bit about, what are some adjustments that we might want to make now that we've done this for about a month and a half. And one of the things that we've learned is our staff are trying to do way too many things, and they're getting tired. And so I think we're going to build in a Wednesday, because our plan already allows Wednesdays. Parents already know if we're in the hybrid, students aren't coming to school. I think we're going to make that a distance learning day so that our staff have a little more time to breathe and prepare and feel like they have a little more time on their side, so to speak. And so that's one of the things that we're considering, and I think we'll do. And then at the same time, I think Tim will speak a little bit more about this, is, how do we actually consider thinking about distance learning at some point in time? Do we want to go back and review our plan, and how are we going to make that better than it was last spring? So that's some things that we're thinking about. Of course, what else? I mean, this could go like 3 or 4 pages long. One of the analogies that I have a short commute to work, but I listen to Dr. Osterholm every once in a while, and he speaks of this analogy of looking out the windshield and looking out the rearview mirror and checking the side mirrors. And so I often think about that, is what are some things that we have to look forward to, and what are some things that we can learn from looking in the past, and side to side, what are some things? And so these are some things that I'm thinking about, is the communication. We always talk about that. Is it clear and consistent? We got our website team together this week, and we looked at it and we said, okay, let's clean this up a little bit. What do we need? What do we need to take off? What do we need to move around? So I took a picture of our website there, and we cleaned it up quite a bit. And so it's a little better look for our parents. I know Fred talked about climate and culture. How do we keep people positive and upbeat and supportive and flexible? And how do we create that community feel within our buildings and within our school community? And I know last week we talked quite a bit about our schools really are safe, and we've done an outstanding job. Every school district, we're obviously going to have cases, but we've done a good job. And so I think communicating that out to the parents. And the other things, I guess the others maybe will speak a little bit more to activities that, we're going to have to juggle now, spectators, and trying to keep everybody happy with 2 tickets per family. That's going to be definitely a challenge, and having all the protocols in place. And then dealing with all those challenges that we do on a daily basis, and then add COVID, like stress and anxiety and just changing so often. I know that's going to be a challenge for our staff and our students and our parents as well. So those are the things that, those are the what else's, I guess, that everybody else is thinking about.
It's a great list, Dan. And thanks for the driving analogy. Mike Osterholm is surely a treasure and a resource for our state and the nation. Mm-hmm. So Andy, what's going on in East Central? And something positive to start with.
Well, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I think focusing on the positive is a big part of our jobs right now, because it's easy to get bogged down in what's not going well and focus on maybe those social media posts that take us to dark places. But really, I think circling back to the positive is what's really good for our school systems and our kids. So in East Central, things are really going quite well. I mean, overall, really, things are going well. Just to highlight a few, prior to COVID, our district was really going after an innovative approach to teaching. Let's try new things. And what can we do different to serve kids? And then COVID hits, and it's like mandated innovation. And so I would say that our staff was well prepared for that. We have a culture of that, and our staff has really embraced this idea that it's okay to try things, and some of them are going to go well and some of them are not. So our staff has really embraced that idea. Our community support has been really good so far. And I would just encourage all school leaders out there, if you really examine the number of negative complaints that you get compared to the population of people in your school district, it is going to be a very small population of people who really think that what you're doing is not right. And so focus back on the positive and remember that, you know, the vast majority of people might be silent, but that means they're with you. So just one more positive. I'm just always amazed by kids, right? When we make a learning model change that's more restrictive, they jump right in and say, oh man, now I got to be at home more. I mean, think about that. You know, they want to be at school. They want to be here and see their friends, and they want to learn. And that's really nice to hear as we start, you know, putting these different procedures in place. They want to be here, and that's exciting. So let's dive into it. Just a distance learning model update. Our model is very similar to Dan's, so I won't dive into that too much. But just a few positives and a few things maybe that we've learned along the way. We put in place a digital navigator a little while back. This person is a dedicated person to connect with families that are having trouble navigating this whole digital idea of distance learning. So if I get an email, or the principals get an email, or if a teacher hears from a parent that's struggling, maybe their internet isn't working, maybe they've you know, haven't paid their internet bill or something like that, this person is dedicated to go connect with them. We've had them drive out and have meetings on the front lawn to talk about how do we get them connected. They've delivered new Chromebooks if something doesn't work. They've brought new chargers out to kids because, you know, the charging cable broke. But that's been a really big hit for our families. So I just encourage districts to think about, do you have a dedicated person that's out there supporting your families that are struggling, trying to do this? Because let's face it, distance learning is not going to go away post-COVID. We need to put these procedures in place so we're ready, even once this all blows over. With distance learning, I think it's important to come back to probably what every school district continues to talk about, and that's this continuous improvement model. We don't have all the answers for distance learning. We don't have all the bugs ironed out, but are we better today than we were yesterday? And I think that's the expectations as school leaders. We want to make sure we continue to review with our staff. So we've tried to really, you know, we basically call it evolving expectations, right? You know, are you trying to do something? Are you trying to make it better? So you know, we just have to keep that at the forefront of what we're trying to do. With distance learning, communication is key. Parents need to know who to talk to. So in the elementary school, there's dedicated staff members to make that happen for them. But in the high school, it's every teacher. So how do they connect with people? Is it email, text, whatever it might be? And I'm just a big kudos to our teachers, because many of them are saying, hey, text me, we'll figure it out. So that communication we found to be really important. And we struggled through that for a while, because parents would call and leave messages on a teacher's phone, not even knowing that they could text that teacher or email that teacher. And so we've worked through that. One of the things with distance learning we've really tried to do is to align the curriculum with our in-person classrooms, because we have found our distance learning numbers were rather high when school started, at least for our small school. But at the secondary level especially, our kids are coming back to us. So if they try to re-enter and step back into their classroom, is the curriculum aligned, and can they step back in? We made a lot of mistakes along the way in the beginning, and we thought we was a whole different track for some of these kids. But as we've made those tweaks and our teachers have really adapted, we've aligned curriculum much, much better these days. Some of our PLCs have really changed the way we've gone about staff development. Our distance learning teachers in the elementary have really stepped up to be our resident experts. And we've made them nervous with that discussion, but they really are ahead of everybody else. And so as we talk, I'll talk more about this in a second, but as we look to move our elementary school to hybrid, those people are ahead of the game. And so building those experts has been great. PLCs have transitioned. We've had a lot of staff development, but also just planning time for our staff to breathe, time for our staff to talk to one another, what's working and what's not. So that's changed. I threw this in there. These days, failure is an option. You know, we always say it's not, but these days it really is. And with the graphic there, we want to fail fast and we want to learn fast. And so our teachers are really trying to embrace that we tried to record this lesson and post it, and it didn't work. My kids were more confused after the lesson than they were before it. So, but that's okay because they tried it. Along those lines, educators tend to be kind of perfectionists, and the perfect video posted is driving some of our teachers crazy. And so we keep telling them, just post it. It's just like a class meeting. You're not going to say everything perfect in class, so let's record it, let's post it, and let's not have this obsessive editing that keeps you up at night. The situation update for East Central, our current case rate is 56.64. I think one of the things we've done well, even county-wide, and I see some of my county colleagues on the call today, is communicating out what that number really means. And if we take out our local prison cases, our number is actually 22.33. Our public health department has been just dynamite helping us navigate what that number means. If the prison cases are contributing to community spread, and right now we're not seeing a huge correlation. So that's been a nice way for us to look at that number and communicate it appropriately. The prediction for next week is hovering right around 40. But again, without the prison, we're about the same. That's what they're predicting for next week. So that's maybe a sign that things are going to change, we hope, start to drop, and we can make plans for in-person instruction again. I've had to find some wood to knock on, but currently there's no cases connected to our school district. We're prepared if that happens, but currently we're keeping it out of our school system, so that's a good thing. Our high school started their hybrid model this week. So far, so good. Things are going okay. And what that means is our high school kids that's 7 through 12, are in-person learning 2 days per week on site. And again, so far, so good. As we look ahead to after MEA, we intend to move our elementary school to a hybrid learning model. Now, I think it's important to remember that we're all making mistakes through this, and I made one as we started to make this transition. When we were ready to move to hybrid, I went back to the plan that we had drafted, 50% capacity. We're going to social distance. We're going to make this happen. And we put it out there. And what that meant for our kids was an A and B schedule, right? Some of our kids were going to be here Mondays and Thursdays. Some were going to be here Tuesdays and Fridays. And we put it out there, perfectly well-crafted email from the superintendent. And then we started meeting and we said, let's go back and examine this 50% number, because we have quite a few kids in distance learning. What do our actual classes look like right now? And as we looked at that, we had a regional call with Resource Training and Solutions, and we heard some guidance from MDE. And we said, we actually think we're meeting the guidance. We're below the 50% occupancy. We have space for our kids. So should we really only have them here 2 days a week? And the answer was no. So after that email went out with all the information, the superintendent got to craft another email that just went out this morning that said, hold on a minute, we're actually going to go to 4 days a week for our preschoolers through 6th grade kids. And that's been a positive for us too, because our parents are happy to hear that their kids are going to be at school more often following the MEA break. Wednesdays will be distance learning days for all kids in the district, which will be nice to build the skills of our educators on those days. And again, some of my Pine County colleagues are on this call. All the Pine County schools are going to have a similar model. So there's some strength in numbers there too as we make this change. What's coming up for us? Fred talked about the spectators at indoor events. We were fortunate enough to receive that guidance somewhere around 10 o'clock yesterday, and our first volleyball game was last night. So we quickly got on social media and said, we're trying to digest this guidance and we will not have spectators at our first volleyball game. But we will make plans for that as we look to next week's volleyball matches here at school. It's a challenging time for the Minnesota State High School League for MDE. I know there's pressure coming from every direction, but we'll do what we can and make the best of it. Next Wednesday, right before the MEA break, we're planning to give our elementary staff a planning day as they transition into hybrid. That's gone over quite well with our staff. Again, some time to breathe, some time to adjust their classroom settings. We're telling them that when you make a learning model change, it should feel different, even if we're going to 4 days a week, but there should be X's on the floor where the desks go. There should be arrows in the hallway. There should be new and updated signage so that this place feels different when we make a learning model change, because we have to tighten up and get a little more strict on some things. So that day is going to be dedicated for those type of things. Meal delivery will start to happen Wednesdays after MEA. So we'll run the buses on that distance learning day to make sure everybody has the meals they need. Childcare will begin the Wednesday after MEA for those critical care workers. And then I just wanted to touch on communications. This is something we're all facing on a daily basis. I had to go back this morning and update our website and all of our plans because our hybrid model we put out months ago is different now in the elementary. And so if there's confusion on that website, we need to make sure that it's up to date. So I was early this morning jumping on there, making those changes. I want to comment on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. What we find is, I'm sure like most of you, that's where our people get their information, but it can't be too long. So what we've jumped on and we've said some positive things about our school, make sure people know what's happening, and then direct them to where they can find all of the information. So shorter clips, but tell them where they can find the information. And so far that's gone over really well. I think as we look ahead to communications and as we're in the thick of it, reminders for families, fall break, MEA breaks coming up. Really, we want the kids in school. So please be mindful, families, of what you're doing over MEA break. If you're planning out of town trips, if whatever is going on, please make sure that you're doing what you can to help us keep our kids in school. And unfortunately, I think we have to put that out there and say, hey, we need you to think about this. A little plug for public health because they continue to tell us this. People need to get tested. If a family member is positive for COVID and the kid's having symptoms, still go take a test. That helps us with contact tracing so we know what's happening even back at school. Because I think Tim's going to talk about a situation coming up similar here where the kid has been out for 3 days, had a COVID test, but we don't know about it yet until after the rumors start to fly. And so we had one recently where the kid has been out for upwards of a week and everybody thought the kid had COVID. And then we were quickly notified that the test was negative. So everybody got fired up for really no reason. And so we're asking families, please talk to us if your kid is out and taking a test. So we can go on and on, like Dan said, what's next? There's so much happening. I feel like right now, 10 minutes is long range planning in school leadership. So we're kind of hanging on for the ride, but that's the East Central update.
That's great, Andy. Lots of practical advice and just really good experience that you've had and really well shared. So Tim, tough act to follow from Dan and Andy, but something positive in Bemidji, and then what's going on with distance learning?
You're right, Fred. It is always a tough act to follow these guys, but good afternoon, everybody. Tim Lutz, Bemidji Area Schools. Something exciting happening in our district right now is that one of our really excellent high school teachers who teaches special ed and phy ed and who has a wonderful program called Unified Sports, which works with teaching students, students with disabilities who are in special education, helping them gain confidence. And she teaches other students without disabilities how to work with these students, and together they become a team and they play sports around the area. Of course, they're not doing much of that now during COVID, but they do other wonderful things together, like have a winter ball, like a prom, where students without disabilities can relate to and connect with and learn empathy around working with students who have disabilities. And this teacher was nominated for an MREA Teacher of Excellence Award, and she was honored by that award. And today the MREA team is in right now to create a small video about her classes. They're interviewing her students, interviewing her. They interviewed me, and it was really a nice way to start the day today, to be able to celebrate the successes of this teacher. And everybody at the high school is excited about this. Something else we're excited about is our first football game this evening. A lot of families and students are looking forward to that, crossing their fingers, because we too, at the last minute, received this guidance yesterday about the indoor spectator guidelines, and we were about to scramble and do the same thing that Andrew talked about, to let families know that we wouldn't start that last night, but we'd do it next week. But we were worried about the pushback on that, and then as it turned out, the visiting team ended up having to cancel because of a COVID case amongst the JV. So everything changes. So our fingers are crossed for tonight that we'll be able to get through it and that everybody behaves in terms of the spectators this evening. So lots of excitement in Bemidji this week. Some of the things that we're doing with distance learning and learning ourselves, you know, at any given time in Bemidji schools, there are a little over 2,000 students who are in some mode of distance learning. About 1,100 of those students, just shy of that number, are distance learning as part of the hybrid model where we're every other week they're at home. But then we have a distance learning, what we call a school within a school, or our distance learning academy, which is full-time distance learning. And as of now, we have over 900 students enrolled in that, just between, well, K through 12, but we have a dedicated team of K through 5 teachers who are working with these full-time students. At the secondary level, the distance learning students are taught by secondary teachers. So those teachers are dealing with 3 cohorts every day. And that's a real challenge. They're dealing with the kids sitting in their desks in front of them for the week, and the students who are out for the week, and that 3rd cohort of students who are full-time distance learning. And that gets to be a challenge. And for those students, those teachers, we've created a Wednesday distance learning day. They can spend that day working on lesson plans, working on videos, and connecting with students who are struggling or who are getting disengaged in the process. I'll talk a little more about that later, but we decided early on to hire a lead teacher or a dean of students to support the teachers in the elementary who are doing full-time work just with distance learners. We saw early on that the numbers were going to be large, and right away we had 500 or 600 students signed up, and over the last couple of weeks, that has grown now to 900 as our numbers are growing. So we saw the need to have a dean or a teacher coordinator supporting these teachers, observing them, helping with absenteeism, helping with discipline or behavior concerns, and that has worked well for us. We are strongly encouraging and trying to coordinate common prep times for all of these distance learning teachers, as well as all of the teachers who are in the middle and the high school buildings who are working with all 3 cohorts so that they can work together. One of the reasons for that is not just to make sure teachers are all on the same page and helping each other with issues, in particular technology concerns, but also in case one of those teachers goes down to COVID. And if they're all on the same page in the curriculum, perhaps another teacher can take over for a while, or we can divvy some of those students up. But it's very important that teachers have the same teacher lead time and common prep time. Something we found too, especially with the full-time distance learners, is the need to create a strong identity, a strong sense of community identity. And some of the teachers are doing that through mascots and other forms of identification. One very good 1st grade teacher gathered her kids for a morning meeting and said, look, you know, we need to have a mascot. What should it be? And, you know, some of the kids were thinking, well, let's be the Tigers, let's be the Bombers, whatever. And they started talking about who they were and what they were doing. And one of the kids said, well, we're from all over. And the teacher said, that's right, you're from all over, and you've all come together from all over to be one class, one identity. You've sort of migrated together. What do you think we could call you? What's an animal or a creature that does that? And one of the little girls said, how about monarch butterflies? They come from all over, they migrate. And so that strong sense of community was created amongst those 1st graders. And that really does make a difference in keeping kids engaged and feeling important as part of a team, part of a family. And so that's been very, very powerful, we've found in our district, and we've shared that with other teachers. Getting back to the idea of an office day, which for the secondary teachers is Wednesdays, we found that that's really crucial, and the teachers were begging us for that just before school started. So we scrambled and made some changes the week before school started and changed our secondary hybrid model so that it was every other week, but with Wednesdays being a distance learning day, so that teachers could use that day to really work on lesson plans and technology issues and to do outreach and connection with families and with students who are kind of dropping off the grid. And that's been very beneficial. The teachers very much do appreciate that. And finally, that's the biggest thing we've been learning is the need to connect, connect, connect. We can't let kids fall off the grid. If they're gone for a day or two, we reach out to parents and try to find out what's happening to keep those kids and those parents engaged. So those are some of the things we're learning and we're working on with distance learning. The technology piece is going very well. The quickest learners have had to be the adults, but that's kind of the way it is with technology. Situation update in Bemidji, we have numbers that are growing with COVID like crazy. I put that little chart there on the right side of the screen just to give you a bit of a sense as to how much we've grown this week alone. Our numbers basically, rolling averages, have doubled every week for the last 2 weeks. A couple of weeks ago, we were under 10. And then last week, we were in the 20s. And now, as you can see at the bottom, we're at 4707 as a rolling 14-day rate as of yesterday, not the MDH's rates, but with 217 cases in the community. And our public health and our Sanford health experts believe that that's still some fallout from Labor Day and from the political rally that was held here 3 weeks ago, and from one particular wedding that was held locally at one of our motels without masking, and at least 27 cases have come out of that. So we're also trying to send out the message to families and to the community that what we're doing in schools is working. We still don't seem to have any community spread, but we're asking our families, we're asking our staff members, take what we're doing in schools home with you on evenings and on weekends. Wear your masks, don't gather together in large groups, do social distancing, hand hygiene and everything else, because we're showing it can work. Do the same thing on weekends, please. So our actual MDH rolling averages jumped up from just over 10 to 23.2, those numbers that came out last night at the end of the day, yesterday afternoon. We're already in the hybrid model for the secondary. We're now looking at, should we go into the hybrid model on our elementary level? Most teachers I've talked to really want to stay all in because they know how challenging it'll be with the hybrid model, and they know that it's working in our schools. And so we have already met, last week we met once with the regional response teams, and they advised us that if the numbers went up, that like Bruce said earlier on, there's not a cut and dry method or data points. The data points are many, and we have to look at all of them. And those data points are everything from our current numbers up to the date, to our MDH numbers, to the age demographics experiencing COVID. I asked County Health to start rolling out information about how many cases amongst 5 and 9-year-old kids who are in our K through 4 grades, how many cases amongst 10 to 14-year-olds in our middle level and the high school. And that's been very informative, and we're finding that we have very few cases. The great majority of COVID cases are those in the 20s, 30s, and up to mid 40s. And so we're going to be meeting again with the response teams on Monday afternoon at 2 o'clock, and we're including our charter schools and all of the other schools in the county. We're going to take a good hard look at all of these data points that I've mentioned. I've also asked County Health to come up with zip code updates because we have a lot of zip codes in the county. And the zip code for Kelliher or Black Duck or Red Lake is different for Bemidji, and that can help inform us as well. And finally, an important data point is simply, again, how are we doing in our schools? Do we have community spread in our schools? And we're still being told that isn't happening yet. How are our staffing, what's our staffing situation looking like? And we are beginning to struggle in 2 of our schools. One of those is one of our elementary schools, and I need to share a couple of stories with you. We had an elementary student who was not feeling well on Monday, went home with a stomach ache at the end of the day. The teacher called home, talked to the mom, and explained that the student wasn't feeling well, had stomach issues, that you might want to keep the child home, maybe take the child to the doctor. They kept the child home on Tuesday. Child wasn't feeling any better. So they took the child in for a test on Wednesday morning and kept the child home Wednesday, but the child began to feel better. So before the test results came in, they decided to send the child to school on Thursday. And Thursday night, last night, the test results came back positive. So now we have to quarantine an entire class of 19 students at that elementary school, on top of 3 students who ride the morning bus with close contact to this student, and most of the afternoon bus that were close to that student. So that was very frustrating for us. And now we have 2 teachers down in that particular school because we had another one go down earlier this week, and we're struggling to maintain staffing. We also had a case with one of our group homes for students who are adjudicated to a group home for behaviors. And there were 3 students who were not feeling well and who had close contact with a positive staff member. Regardless of that knowledge, the staffing at that group home sent those children to our schools. And now one of those students has been positively identified. So I had to have a serious conversation with the director of that group home, asking them to treat the students like their children, or like we're asking parents to treat children. Screen them every day, keep them in the group home at the, if they're not feeling well or if there are problems. So I got a little bit ahead of myself with this as I'm kind of rolling into this next slide, but we've only had 5 cases where we've needed contact tracing this week. And it has gone very well because our schools are doing a good job of keeping students in different cohorts. And it does not require a lot of issues until we have the kind of a situation we had where a child comes in unbeknownst to us who is positive with COVID. So we had 2 kindergarten classes now in quarantine at that particular school because parents are not following quarantine guidelines. In the local group home you see there. So what we're doing now this week and next week is really trying to get the message out with our newspapers and our other mass media, TV and radio, reminding parents of the need to screen their children. And if they're waiting for test results, to please wait till those results come in. And of course, if students aren't feeling well, stay home, get some kind of a test done, or go to the doctor and find out, what might be causing that. Is it a cold? Is it an allergy? Or could it possibly be COVID? Get some kind of a diagnosis before you send them back to school. So lots of changes happening. We're anticipating that we might need to do a reset of a couple of weeks with distance learning, or go into distance learning for a longer period, perhaps starting next week, but we'll find out when we meet with the regional response teams next week. So that's what's happening in Bemidji. Thank you.
Great, Tim. And now Bruce, after hearing these 3 specific stories from the districts where they are, can you share the regional perspective from your point of view?
Well, thank you, Dr. Nolan. As I mentioned, I'm Bruce Jensen. I am the director of the Northwest Service Co-op. The Northwest Service Co-op is headquartered out of Thief River Falls, Minnesota. And it's quite a large geographical area. We have Canada on the north, have North Dakota on the west. And then on the east side, we include all the way up to Baudette, down to Park Rapids, and then across again to the north. As a former superintendent, I have viewed these COVID Convo every week, and I am just so impressed with the work that's being done with the 3 superintendents that have been on explaining what they're doing in their schools. And as like most service co-ops, we in Northwest have a school leader meeting every week. Ours is on Wednesday. And we normally have about 50 school leaders that attend that Zoom meeting. And again, I am just so impressed with the attitudes and the caring of our school leaders as we work our way through this COVID pandemic. And the co-ops, we're kind of asked to be involved with these response teams. And we were glad to do that, because if there's anything we can do for our member school districts, we sure would like to do that. And what we are finding out, the first guidance came out from the governor where they came up with those numbers, up to 10 and then from 10 to 20. It was a pretty simple graph. And then MDE, they have added on quite a bit more guidance for school districts. And, you know, obviously we all are appreciative of their work. And we would think it would be nice if we could just follow those graphs and just make every decision based on the graphs and the information that we have been given. Kind of a boilerplate, cut and dry type decision process. But what we're finding out in working with schools is that it's much, much more complicated than that. And there are a lot of factors that make each school district unique and different. And a lot of those things have to be weighed in. Now, you know, an extreme example is the one with Andy that has a prison in his district. Well, not a lot of school districts have that unique situation, but every district is unique. And what maybe is working in one district is not the perfect solution for another district. And so we find that we, in working with the school districts, we have to navigate all of those different scenarios and different political pressures and different, you know, whatever. And it gets to be very, very complex. But it's just so interesting to see how every school district that we've ever worked with, you know, kids are first. What's the best thing for our kids? And sometimes the other things that come along with it, we just have to rise above it. And I know Andy said sometimes you get some negative responses from, you know, parents or whomever, from the media. And again, I just want to reiterate what he says is that there probably isn't that many that are really complaining about what you're doing. So, you know, if there anything that the co-ops can do, if there's anything the response teams can help you with, you know, ultimately the decision is a district decision, but, you know, please use the resources you have available and just continue the good work. I know as a superintendent, I never had to deal with anything this large or this impactful to a school district. And what the school leaders are dealing with now is just, in my mind, unbelievable. I mean, and I just hope that the people in the communities in these school districts realize how much responsibility these school leaders have, and the great job that they are doing. So again, if there's anything the co-ops can help you with, please let us know, and the best of luck to all of you. That's about all I have, Fred. So.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And I wholeheartedly agree with your comments about the work of our superintendents statewide and nationwide, as well as all their school leaders and teachers, because it is a challenge that you or I never faced as superintendents. So wholeheartedly agree. Well, Neil, what's from your perspective, what should people be thinking about in terms of case rates and school rates, and what other information do you have of use for anybody in a school system?
I really appreciate the comments of the superintendent and also Bruce with respect to developing a more nuanced approach to figuring out what model of learning should be taking place and looking at the individual characteristics of the space. I think one thing that really should be focused on fairly strongly is looking at the specific school situation, and are you having community spread in your school? In other words, is there a case that comes into your school and all of a sudden you've got 10 or 15 people that actually come down with COVID, not be quarantined, but actually come down? And if there's that situation is arising, then we've got some control situations that aren't working very well in the school, and that needs to be tightened up. And that may really impact which model you end up going into teaching. What we've been seeing at the U, and I've had discussions with other locations, is inside the school, in the teaching environment, we really aren't seeing these super spreader events, which means our control mechanisms are working fairly well. Now, a week from now, that could certainly change, but that's what we're seeing. What the district superintendents have mentioned, particularly Tim, was people not approaching it or not working appropriately and bringing problems into the school because they don't follow the specific guidelines after testing or do irresponsible behavior and contract the disease. I think the other part that's going to be really interesting from my perspective is figuring out how to do indoor sporting events safely. And I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but I think that'll be a real interesting problem to solve going forward. We can go to the next slide. There are two major changes that districts should be aware of. ASHRAE came out recently with some new guidelines, and I think this will help out from both energy conservation and from a safety standpoint with respect to freezing. They're indicating that you should turn fans on 2 hours prior to occupancy and leave them on 2 hours after occupancy and not do 24/7 fan operation. I think that's going to be real critical as we move into the colder months. And if we run fans 24/7, and particularly at nighttime, you can freeze up a coil relatively quickly. No one's around. You can have a big water event, and that causes a lot of problems. And it causes millions of dollars of damage to the university over the years. So we're advocating right now that you make changes to the amount of outside air based on temperature and comfort, and to prevent coils from freezing. I think you've got solid epidemiological evidence for it. In fact, if you have good filters, good recirculation, I think you're going to be fine. And the outside air, we'll have to bring it down a little bit, but I think that's still a safe way to manage the school. The other thing is the CDC finally recognized that that COVID, SARS-CoV-2, or the virus that causes COVID, is actually airborne. I've been thinking they'd be doing it for about 6 months, but now they finally got around to it. The data does suggest that the main method of transmission is close contact between persons and close large particle aerosols, and less likely or less common of smaller particles. I think we're also seeing evidence of outdoor transmission, particularly if people are less than 6 feet away. Next.
Before you do that, just for those of us that are not heating and ventilating experts, what's ASHRAE stand for?
American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers.
Thank you.
Yep. So the other thing has been some research we're doing primarily. It'll affect the university band, but I'm looking at primarily instructor-led, single-person working on musical instruments. So they're trying to teach these individuals, they're trying to do it safely, so they're actually putting covers on the exhalation part of the instrument. And they're using several different types of fabrics. The initial ones I've tested have not been very good at all. And the ones that have been fairly good, they restrict the airflow too much, so we aren't getting proper tone coming out of the instrument. So we're trying to work through the delicate balance of coming up with filter material that actually works, but doesn't impede the airflow too much. I think what we'll probably end up is kind of a hybrid system where we're using like this black cloth that's over on the left, and then a Swiffer cloth that's on the right. Combine the two, and we might get a fit factor that's appropriate. The other testing method that at school, if you're trying to do this, just stick a piece of tissue paper in front of the exhalation valve on the instrument, and if the person blows on the instrument and the tissue paper wafts, then that means the cover is not doing any good at all. We're also using that same logic with respect to wearing cloth face coverings.
Well, thank you, Neil. And Aaron, I'm not seeing any other questions. If anybody wants to type a question in, please do so right away, because we're running right down to the nubbin here on time. Again, great information. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jeff, and we'll pause if we get a question, but I'll turn it back to you.
All right, thanks, Fred. And again, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat function. I'm going to just address one item on the ventilation information, and just kind of clarify. You know, when we were in the summer mode and we're talking about ventilation and about trying to increase your ventilation rates at your school, as you heard Neil talk about, we were guided to run ventilation systems 24 hours a day. right? Run your systems, turn that fresh air over. So in addition, open your dampers, bring in as much fresh air as you can. And so what Neil's talking about, making sure your coils don't freeze. You know, I've worked with a lot of school districts, and a lot of schools may have been changing your ventilation rates to allow you to bring more fresh air in. But as we're getting closer to winter, I do think it's important to make sure that you haven't overridden your control systems to have 100% of fresh air coming in, because what Neil's talking about is a true reality. You may freeze up the coils that aren't designed to bring in that much fresh air when it's really cold outside. And if you freeze up a coil, now you're going to have no ventilation as you sit and work on the costly repairs of that. So I think that's some great feedback. It's something for everybody to be thinking about. I want to just make sure everyone is aware, a reminder again, that our COVID Convo will be next Wednesday instead of Friday due to MEA break. And we're going to get into some discussions about COVID fatigue and maybe some of the challenges as we continue to go towards the colder weather forward. So with that, I just want to thank Dr. Fred Nolan and all of the panelists for their time and efforts today. And everyone have a great weekend. Thank you.